Welcome to AI Unraveled, your daily strategic briefing. It is Saturday, March 21, 2026. I'm your co-host, Anna. Today's episode is brought to you by Jamga Tech. If you want the high-density, ads-free version of this briefing, check out our premium feed linked in the show notes. Today, we are looking at what happens when AI stops being a novelty and becomes critical infrastructure. The Pentagon has just locked in Palantir's Maven as the permanent AI targeting system for the U.S. military. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have a blueprint for AI doing exactly what it was meant to do, protecting us. We'll discuss how Anthropic's Claude just scanned 2 million medical records in Texas to catch life-threatening heart issues. We're also tracking OpenAI's massive hiring spree, SpaceX's growing monopoly, and why Microsoft is suddenly ripping AI features out of Windows 11. Let's get into the news.
Right now, down in the state of Texas, there are an estimated 4 to 6 million people who are missing out on life-saving medical treatments every single year.
Yeah, and the crazy part is, it's not a supply chain issue.
Exactly. It's not because the pharmaceuticals haven't been invented yet or, a shortage of medical hardware.
Right.
It is happening purely because human doctors physically do not have enough hours in the day to read through all the messy, fragmented, just deeply unorganized medical files of their patient populations.
Which is, it's a catastrophic failure of data processing.
Yeah.
And it's literally costing human lives.
So today, we're looking at what happens when we finally stop treating artificial intelligence as this flashy, hallucinating chatbot and actually start deploying it to do the heavy, invisible lifting of keeping our society functional. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
For this analysis, I'm going to be adopting the persona of a geopolitical tech analyst, and you're bringing the perspective of a systems architect.
That's right.
And we've got this massive stack of sources on the table today detailing the operational reality of, moving AI out of the browser and structurally integrating it into our legacy institutions.
And the foundational lens we really need to apply to all these sources today is Daniel Kahneman's concept of System 2 thinking.
Oh, yeah, the cognitive psychology framework. Break that down for us a bit.
Right. So Kahneman distinguishes between System 1, which is fast, instinctive, very emotional, and honestly highly prone to error.
Like snap judgments.
Exactly. And then you have System 2, which is slower, much more deliberate, analytical, and logically rigorous. And if you look at the tech industry for the past, 3 years, we have been entirely obsessed with the System 1 phase of AI.
Oh, 100%. The whole generative boom.
Right. We saw the rapid deployment of these conversational agents that prioritize speed and fluency over actual accuracy. They were reactive. They hallucinated facts constantly.
They're just trying to sound human as fast as possible.
Exactly. But now what we're seeing in these sources is that the market and these massive legacy institutions are essentially forcing a transition into a System 2 architecture.
We're looking at the deliberate, highly verified integration of this tech into environments where, frankly, failure is just not an option.
Right. Environments with zero tolerance for latency or error.
And the sources we have give us a perfect cross-section of this. We've got internal Pentagon memos detailing the structural lock-in of AI targeting systems.
Which is huge.
We have deployment reports from the front lines of that exact healthcare crisis in Texas we just talked about. We've got OpenAI's internal corporate expansion blueprints and user feedback logs from massive course corrections at Microsoft and Google.
There's a lot to cover.
It is, and we're going to track two opposing forces here. On one side, we have what we're calling administrative lifting.
Right, the quiet, successful back-end integration of AI.
Exactly. And on the other side, we have the market reality of consumer feature fatigue.
The severe backlash when tech companies, force generative models into basic interfaces where they just introduce latency and ruin trust.
Let's start with the environments that have absolutely zero tolerance for error. The defense sector.
The ultimate proving ground for System 2.
Right. We have this March 9th letter from Deputy Secretary of Defense Steve Feinberg to senior Pentagon leaders. And it is a watershed document.
It really is. It details the transition of Palantir's Maven artificial intelligence system.
Which has been a sort of a pilot initiative for a while now, right?
Yeah, but this letter states that Maven is officially moving from a pilot into a designated program of record. And to understand the geopolitical weight of that, you have to understand defense procurement.
Let's get into the weeds on that. The Department of Defense operates on this framework, the PPBE. Planning, programming, budgeting, and execution.
It's notoriously rigid. It's a multi-year cycle.
And when tech is operating under a temporary contract, it lives in this place that defense contractors actually call the Valley of Death.
Yeah, the valley of death is brutal. You have to constantly prove your worth, scrounge for discretionary funding year after year.
You have to survive different political administrations coming in and out.
Exactly. So transitioning to a program of record fundamentally alters the DNA of that technology's existence inside the military.
It's like moving from renting a trendy apartment on a month-to-month lease to just pouring a massive concrete foundation and building a fortress.
I like that analogy, yeah. Because it means Maven now has its own dedicated, permanent funding line locked into the congressional budget for years into the future.
So the military is basically pouring the concrete for its future operational architecture. Palantir's Maven isn't just software they're testing anymore. It's the load-bearing nervous system for weapons targeting.
Right. And Feinberg's letter explicitly says that embedding this system gives warfighters the tools to detect, deter, and dominate adversaries in all domains.
And all domains is key there.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Land, sea, air, space, cyberspace. We are talking about the fusion of just massive, disparate data pipelines.
So as the systems architect here, break down the mechanics of that data fusion, because that's where the System 2 intelligence actually happens, right?
Yes, so think about a modern theater of conflict. It generates an incomprehensible amount of raw data. You've got synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, from satellites that can see through cloud cover.
Right.
You have electro-optical and infrared feeds from drones at 40,000 feet. You've got signals intelligence picking up enemy radio chatter, plus the telemetry from your own ground troops.
And historically, all of that had to be parsed by a human.
Exactly. A human intelligence analyst had to sit in a secure facility, pull these separate feeds onto like 6 different monitors, and manually cross-reference them.
Which creates a massive manual bottleneck.
A huge one. I mean, if an analyst spots a potential mobile surface-to-air missile battery, they have to verify the coordinates. They have to check local civilian infrastructure maps.
Right, to ensure compliance with the laws of armed conflict. No striking near hospitals or schools.
Exactly. And then route that targeting package all the way up the chain of command for strike authorization. That human-driven OD loop, observe, orient, decide, act, it can take hours.
And in modern peer-to-peer conflict, hours is an eternity.
Yeah. A mobile missile battery or a high-value target might only remain stationary for, say, 12 minutes before they pack up and relocate.
So Maven steps in and compresses the orient and decide phases of that loop down to machine speed.
Down to milliseconds. It ingests all that unstructured data from the satellites, drones, and sensors simultaneously. It uses computer vision to identify the battery, cross-references the geography against civilian databases instantly, and presents a fully verified firing solution to the commander.
But just to be clear here, the AI does not authorize the strike.
No, absolutely not. The human retains the lethal agency. But the algorithmic nervous system does all the massive administrative lifting required to track thousands of moving variables.
Which creates this immediate shift in the entire geopolitical deterrence calculus. Because modern warfare is just as much a race for algorithmic efficiency as it is a race for munitions.
Right. If your adversary knows that the U.S. military decision cycle operates exponentially faster than their own ability to even deploy and hide their assets, traditional strategic posturing is basically obsolete.
The nation that can process the battlefield at the edge, utilizing AI to just filter out the noise, dictates the entire pace of the conflict.
But, and this is a massive but, that algorithmic dominance exposes a glaring structural vulnerability.
The space infrastructure.
Exactly. Maven's software architecture is completely blind without the hardware sensors feeding it data in the first place.
It requires an uninterrupted stream of satellite telemetry, which pushes us directly into the shifting power dynamics of orbital logistics. And we've got sources detailing the Space Force's recent contracting decisions that really highlight this bottleneck.
Yeah, the Space Force officially reallocated the final 4 GPS Block 3 satellite launches.
They stripped them away from ULA, the United Launch Alliance, and awarded them entirely to SpaceX starting in 2024.
And we really need to look at ULA's historical position here. For almost 2 decades, ULA, which is a joint venture between Lockheed Martin and Boeing.
The ultimate legacy titans.
Right. They held a virtual monopoly on national security space launches. They were the undisputed government-backed gateway to orbit.
So the fact that the Space Force is actively migrating the crown jewels of its navigational infrastructure away from them, that signals a fundamental failure in legacy engineering philosophies.
It does. And the failure is highly specific. ULA's next-generation Vulcan rocket has been grounded because of recurring catastrophic anomalies in its solid rocket boosters.
They had identical failures on 2 of their first 4 flights.
Yeah, and this really highlights the severe limitations of monolithic hardware design when you're trying to keep pace with the deployment of modern digital infrastructure.
Because solid rocket boosters, they aren't like liquid engines. They're essentially highly controlled, massive chemical explosives.
Right. You cast the solid propellant inside a casing, and once you ignite it, that's it. You cannot throttle it. You cannot shut it down.
It's just a controlled bomb.
Exactly. So the forensic investigation required for a solid rocket anomaly is agonizingly slow.
Yeah.
You can't just run a software patch or do a hot fire test on a stand.
You have to ground the entire fleet.
Ground the fleet, disassemble the hardware, analyze the microscopic grain geometry of the solid fuel, redesign the casing, rebuild the physical supply chain.
It's a process that takes years.
Yes. And the Pentagon's timeline for deploying its System 2 AI architecture does not have years to wait.
Especially for GPS Block 3 satellites. Those are crucial. They provide a much stronger, highly encrypted M-code signal that is heavily resistant to electronic warfare and jamming.
Which is exactly the environment where systems like Maven have to operate.
So to get those satellites into low Earth orbit reliably and rapidly, the Space Force has essentially defaulted to SpaceX's Falcon 9 platform.
Consolidating what we have to define as an orbital monopoly.
Right. SpaceX is no longer just this innovative contractor. It is the sole functioning bridge between the terrestrial military apparatus and the space-based infrastructure required to run global AI.
Because the Falcon 9 uses liquid-fueled Merlin engines.
Yeah.
It's an iterative, software-driven design. They test them, recover them, fly them again. It creates a launch cadence that legacy aerospace just mathematically cannot match.
So NASA and the DoD are now structurally captive to a single private entity.
Which is an unprecedented strategic risk. We are establishing Palantir's Maven as a permanent concrete foundation for defense, but the physical logistics required to sustain it depend on a corporate entity controlled by a single, highly volatile executive.
Elon Musk.
Right. When the government previously relied on ULA, they were dealing with massive, slow, bureaucratic corporate boards.
They were slow, but they were predictable and highly sensitive to traditional financial leverage.
Exactly. But the orbital monopoly operates under completely different economic physics. Look at the civil jury verdict against Musk in California that just came out.
Oh, regarding the Twitter acquisition in 2022.
Yes. The jury found that Musk intentionally misled Twitter shareholders by publicly questioning the platform's bot metrics to try and back out of the $44 billion deal.
Which caused an immediate 8% drop in the share price.
And the resulting damages they're facing are estimated to reach up to $2.6 billion.
Now, for any traditional aerospace CEO or defense contractor, a $2.6 billion penalty is an existential crisis.
It ends the company. Board revolts, massive sell-offs, immediate restructuring.
But the scale of wealth concentrated at the top of this orbital monopoly totally neutralizes those guardrails. Musk's net worth fluctuates around, what, $660 billion?
Something like that, yeah. So a $2.6 billion penalty represents less than half of 1% of his total wealth.
It's literally a rounding error.
It is. And the geopolitical takeaway here isn't really about the mechanics of a social media acquisition. It's about the extreme asymmetry of consequence.
Right. The traditional financial levers that regulators and the Pentagon use to enforce compliance and stability from defense contractors, they mathematically do not apply to the architect of our space access.
Exactly. When the individual holding the keys to your military AI nervous system is entirely insulated from standard market penalties, the whole concept of a secure, sovereign defense infrastructure gets very complicated.
The state is structurally reliant on an entity it cannot easily control.
Precisely.
Okay, so we're seeing this massive top-down integration of AI at the absolute highest levels of global defense. But the operational reality of System 2 thinking is equally critical when we apply it to the failing legacy systems of our domestic infrastructure.
Which brings us back to that healthcare crisis in Texas.
Right. The deployment of AI in these massive medical networks offers, honestly, the most profound blueprint for how to correctly integrate this technology without triggering institutional rejection or just catastrophic liability.
Because the healthcare sector right now is completely paralyzed by data gravity.
Data gravity. Explain that.
Well, hospitals have spent the last 2 decades digitizing their records, right? Moving from paper files to sprawling electronic medical record systems like Epic and Cerner.
Right, the EMRs.
But digitization did not equal organization.
Oh, not at all.
A single patient with a complex chronic condition might have a file containing thousands of pages.
And it's not neat data. You have structured data, sure, like a recent blood pressure reading in a neat little column, but the vast majority of it is unstructured.
Exactly. 10-year-olds scan PDFs of specialist notes, faxed lab results from out-of-network clinics.
The fact that they still use fax machines is wild to me.
It's crazy, but they do. And hastily typed physician summaries full of typos and shorthand.
The human brain cannot instantly synthesize that volume of unstructured data. I don't care if you're the most brilliant cardiologist on the planet, you cannot read a 2,000-page file in the 15 minutes you get for a patient consultation.
You physically can't. And that is why 4 to 6 million patients in Texas fall through the cracks. It's a data retrieval failure.
Not a medical failure.
Right, so the University of Texas Medical Branch, UTMB, they recognize this. And they deployed an enterprise AI platform powered by Anthropic's Claude to attack this exact bottleneck.
And the architecture of this deployment is what we're calling the gold standard for administrative lifting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it completely abandons the whole AI doctor narrative.
Which is such a relief. Nobody wants an autonomous diagnostic AI agent. The malpractice insurance nightmares alone.
Oh, it introduces impossible liability frameworks. So instead, UTMB utilizes the model strictly as an advanced semantic search and retrieval engine.
Scanning a population of over 2 million people.
Right. And the mechanics of how Claude processes these files is fascinating. It relies on vector databases and RAG retrieval augmented generation.
Break down RAG for the listeners who aren't systems architects.
Sure. So the system takes those decades-old faxes, right? It runs optical character recognition to turn the messy images into actual text. Then it converts that text into vector embeddings, which essentially maps the semantic meaning of every single sentence into a massive multidimensional mathematical space.
So it's not just using Control F to find a word.
Exactly. When the AI scans a patient's history looking for indicators of heart failure, it isn't just looking for the keyword heart. It actually understands the contextual relationship between, say, a slight drop in ejection fraction noted in 2019, a complaint of shortness of breath in 2021, and a recent prescription change.
It connects the disparate dots across time.
Yes. But the most critical structural element of the UTMB blueprint is the strict delineation of agency.
The AI makes absolutely zero medical decisions.
Zero. It does not prescribe, it does not diagnose,
No.
It just identifies the pattern and immediately surfaces the exact source files to a human physician.
It's like having a tireless, mathematically precise medical librarian who just hands you the exact book and page you need, rather than a robot trying to perform open heart surgery.
Perfect analogy. It flags the discrepancy, provides the citations, and allows the human doctor to review the original lab result, validate the algorithmic logic, and make the final clinical judgment.
And the impact of separating that administrative lifting from the actual medical decision-making is insane. In the first month of deployment at UTMB, this system analyzed the backlog and found that up to a third of heart failure patients had undocumented gaps in their care histories.
1/3.
33% of the population suddenly became eligible for optimized life-saving therapies simply because the AI could read faster and remember more than a human administrative team.
And notice, the human agency is fully preserved. The liability remains with the licensed physician, and the patient outcome improves dramatically.
That is the operational reality of successful enterprise integration.
But, supporting this level of bespoke, highly secure, on-premise integration, it requires a massive evolution from the AI companies themselves.
Right, because they can't just operate as scrappy research labs releasing consumer web apps anymore.
No, to service the Pentagon or a massive hospital network, they have to become colossal enterprise contractors.
Which brings us to OpenAI. We have Financial Times reporting detailing OpenAI's massive corporate expansion blueprints. They're planning to nearly double their global workforce, scaling from roughly 4,500 employees to 8,000 by the end of 2026.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
But it's not just an increase in server capacity or headcount. It's a fundamental restructuring of their entire business model.
Right, and the distribution of these new hires is the real signal. They are aggressively scaling product development, enterprise engineering, and research. But the most revealing job title they're actively recruiting for is the technical ambassador.
Yeah, the technical ambassador.
Yeah.
From an architecture standpoint, the deployment of these forward-facing ambassadors indicates the definitive end of the API-only era.
Oh, completely. Because in the early stages of this boom, the business model was entirely frictionless for the AI labs, right?
Oh yeah, they would train a massive foundational model, put an API, an application programming interface in front of it, and just charge developers a fraction of a cent per token to access it.
The burden of integration was entirely on the customer. You literally just hand a company an API key and tell their IT department, good luck, figure out how to build a product around this.
Right. But legacy institutions cannot simply pipe their highly classified or legally protected data through a public API.
A hospital like UTMB cannot send raw patient data over the open internet to a multi-tenant cloud server. The high pay compliance violations, the data egress limits.
It's illegal, and the Department of Defense certainly cannot route satellite targeting telemetry through a standard commercial API.
Obviously not.
They require localized on-premise deployments.
Mm.
They need to fine-tune these models on their own specific, highly secure internal data structures. They need virtual private clouds, military-grade encryption.
So the technical ambassador is essentially a hybrid. They're an advanced systems engineer mixed with a high-level enterprise consultant.
Exactly. OpenAI realizes that to achieve the kind of permanent System 2 lock-in that, say, Palantir enjoys with Maven, they have to actually embed their engineers directly into the boardrooms and IT departments of the Fortune 500.
They have to custom fit the models to the bespoke data pipelines of multinational banks and hospital networks.
They are transforming from a simple software vendor into a full-service structural engineering firm.
Which makes complete strategic sense. But, and here's where things get complicated, the internal friction at OpenAI really becomes apparent when we look at their parallel consumer initiatives.
Yeah, the consumer side is a whole different story.
Because while they are building this quiet, invisible infrastructure for the enterprise side, they are simultaneously pushing a highly aggressive, highly visible consumer strategy.
The Superapp.
Right. The sources outline OpenAI's initiative to consolidate their disparate tools into a single desktop Superapp. They want to merge the standard ChatGPT interface with a dedicated web browser, integrate their Atlas tool.
Atlas being the tool that handles complex, unstructured data parsing and semantic enterprise search.
Right. And they want to fold in Codex, which is their engine that translates natural language intent directly into executable code scripts.
So they're trying to build an agentic super app that sits directly on your desktop, intercepting and managing all your daily workflows.
And the term agentic is really the key there, isn't it?
It is. It implies a massive shift. We're moving from a reactive tool that waits for your prompt to an active agent that actively observes your desktop environment, tries to anticipate your needs, and executes multi-step tasks across different applications.
They want to capture the entire attention layer of the operating system.
Which exposes a huge contradiction in their philosophy.
Yeah.
Because the enterprise success of AI relies entirely on it being invisible, acting as the plumbing behind the walls, like at UTMB. But the super app strategy demands that AI be the most visible, unavoidable interface on your machine.
It puts them on a direct collision course with consumer patients. I mean, think about it. If a developer wants to use Codex to generate a quick Python script, they want a clean, fast, localized tool.
Right. They do not want an overarching super app simultaneously trying to browse the web, parse their local documents, and manage their calendar just to write 10 lines of code.
When tech companies force these incredibly heavy synthesis engines into daily consumer interfaces where they are neither needed nor requested, the market violently rejects it.
And we are currently witnessing the leading edge of that rejection. The transition from the utility of administrative lifting to the psychological exhaustion of feature fatigue.
Feature fatigue, it's so real, and we can observe the mechanics of this backlash super clearly in the recent data surrounding Google and Microsoft.
Let's look at Google search first.
Yeah. Google built its entire empire on being the ultimate neutral directory of the internet. It was the digital card catalog. You type a query, it routes you to the highest quality original source.
A very deterministic function.
Exactly. But the sources show that Google is now aggressively deploying AI to rewrite the news headlines that appear directly in its search results.
Which is a huge structural shift.
They are utilizing generative models to synthesize and alter the surface-level presentation of journalistic content before the user ever even clicks the link.
And the architectural failure here is applying a generative synthesis tool to a directory function that requires rigid, deterministic accuracy.
Because large language models operate on next token prediction, right?
Exactly. They generate plausible sequences of text based on probabilistic weights. They do not natively retrieve rigid facts. They guess what word should come next.
So when Google uses this mechanism to rewrite a headline, the model often hallucinates or just fundamentally alters the semantic meaning of the original article.
It strips away all the nuance and context provided by the actual journalist who wrote it.
And the trust deficit this creates is catastrophic for a search platform. I mean, if a user searches for breaking financial news and the AI overview rewrites the headline to imply a company is going bankrupt when the actual article merely discusses, like, a minor quarterly loss.
The utility of the search engine is broken. It's the equivalent of the UTMB hospital AI deciding to creatively rewrite a patient's medical history instead of just pointing the doctor to the original lab result.
When the directory alters the destination, the ecosystem fractures.
And the consumer market is highly, highly sensitive to this friction. The feedback loops are actually forcing massive corporate retreats right now.
Which brings us to Microsoft. They provide the perfect case study in feature fatigue.
Oh, absolutely.
Over the past year, Microsoft literally bolted their Copilot AI assistant into virtually every single application within the Windows ecosystem. The mandate was total integration regardless of the core function of the software.
Right. And the sweeping changes currently rolling out to Windows 11 are a direct response to universal user outrage.
Microsoft is actively stripping Copilot entry points out of basic legacy applications. They are removing the AI integrations from Notepad, the snipping tool, the Photos app, the widgets board.
They are publicly acknowledging that bolting a multi-billion parameter neural network onto a basic text editor was a huge mistake.
We really need to analyze the specific latency and UX degradation that causes this phenomenon of AI clutter.
Let's look at Notepad. What is the actual function of Notepad?
It's a digital scrap of paper. Its primary value proposition is a 0-millisecond load time. You open it to temporarily paste a URL or jot down a grocery list.
Right. So by integrating Copilot, Microsoft forced a local lightweight utility to establish a connection with a cloud-based server rack just to open a blank page.
It is the architectural equivalent of routing a manual light switch in your bedroom through a remote data center in Virginia.
Yes, you introduce network latency, processing delays, and visual clutter into an environment that demands absolute simplicity.
Users do not need a generative model offering to rewrite their grocery list as a Shakespearean sonnet.
No, they don't.
It's like putting a jet engine on a bicycle. The jet engine is an engineering marvel, sure, but strapping it to a bicycle does not improve the bicycle. It makes it entirely unwritable.
The core workflow is interrupted by unrequested tools that just degrade performance.
And so the dichotomy of AI adoption is fully exposed here. Artificial intelligence is structurally transformative when applied to massive, complex background logic.
Processing satellite telemetry for Maven. Scanning 2 million vector-embedded medical records for Claude.
Yes. But when it is weaponized as a novelty to just capture user attention in basic interfaces, it degenerates into AI clutter.
And the tech industry is finally grappling with the reality that just because you have raw computational power, it doesn't justify omnipresence.
No, it doesn't. And this pushback against ubiquitous, poorly integrated AI is no longer just contained to, like, Reddit tech forums and feedback logs. It is rising to the level of federal regulation.
Right. Our final piece of intelligence notes that the Trump administration has unveiled a national AI policy framework.
And it is explicitly designed to limit state power and overreach regarding AI expansion and integration.
Which shows that the regulatory environment is shifting to align with this consumer backlash. We are seeing a simultaneous demand for structural integrity from both the bottom up.
Users demanding Microsoft remove clutter from their desktops.
Exactly. And from the top down, with regulators attempting to establish clear boundaries against unchecked, sweeping AI deployments that lack actual utility or security frameworks.
The market is demanding that we tap the brakes on the novelty and focus entirely on reliability.
It's a massive pivot.
The trajectory we have mapped out today is just profound. We started by examining the invisible, concrete foundations being poured by the Department of Defense. Palantir's Maven locking in as a permanent program of record to accelerate the geopolitical ODA loop.
Right, and we analyzed the vulnerabilities of the physical infrastructure supporting that system, highlighting the unprecedented leverage held by SpaceX's orbital monopoly.
And the complete insulation of its chief executive from traditional financial consequences.
Then we contrasted that military application with the life-saving potential of administrative lifting in Texas healthcare networks.
UTMB proving that utilizing AI strictly as a semantic retrieval engine, maintaining a strict human-in-the-loop architecture, it can synthesize decades of unstructured data without assuming catastrophic liability.
But the friction emerges when companies like OpenAI attempt to scale out of that invisible backend and build agentic super apps to dominate the desktop interface.
That aggressive push for visibility directly results in the market backlash we are seeing today. Google hemorrhaging trust by hallucinating news headlines, and Microsoft being forced into a humiliating retreat, frantically scrubbing AI clutter from Notepad to cure the severe feature fatigue of its user base.
We are watching the permanent infrastructure of the next century being negotiated in real time. And the dividing line between success and failure is entirely dependent on whether the technology is deployed to perform heavy lifting in the background or whether it's deployed to interrupt the user in the foreground.
We always try to push past the immediate data and look at the secondary consequences of these shifts. And I want you to consider a specific, highly problematic scenario regarding the future of public trust.
This is the real paradox.
It is. We are rapidly approaching a reality where enterprise AI becomes the flawless, invisible infrastructure of our society. It will manage the targeting of our military, the load balancing of our national energy grids, the forensic analysis of our medical records. It will literally be the plumbing.
But simultaneously, the consumer-facing AI that the public actually interacts with on a daily basis remains a cluttered, hallucinating mess in their search engines and desktop applications.
Exactly the friction point. If the public's daily interaction with visible AI is characterized by frustration, latency, and broken trust, the psychological spillover is inevitable.
Oh, absolutely.
If a user learns that they cannot trust the AI to accurately summarize a simple news headline, or if they grow to actively hate the AI that continually crashes their basic text editor, how long until that localized distrust metastasizes?
Will the public eventually demand the dismantling of the invisible systems they actually rely on, the AI managing their hospital records or securing the airspace, simply because of the visible failures of the consumer apps they interact with?
The visible failures eroding the political and social capital required to sustain the invisible successes. It's a massive systemic risk.
It is.
If you are analyzing these structural shifts and you require the absolute granular forensic details without the surface level noise, if you are building the architecture we discussed today, you need to integrate the ads-free Jamgatech premium feed into your workflow.
Highly recommend it.
It is the definitive resource for systems architects and analysts who need to stay ahead of the operational reality of global tech integration. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Ignore the flashy interface, focus on the architecture, look for the structural load-bearing deployments, and keep questioning the mechanics of the invisible systems around you.
Until the next briefing, keep connecting the dots.
That concludes our rundown for March 21st. The signal for today is integration over innovation. The biggest stories today aren't about new models. They are about how existing models are being wired into hospitals, the military, and our operating systems, and how we deal with the friction when it goes wrong. This episode was made possible by JamgaMind. Until tomorrow, keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.